Dragon Ball is one of the most popular and beloved franchises on the planet. And despite having ups and downs, we wouldn't change a thing about it. Speaking of, there were a lot of points throughout Dragon Ball where the story, character, and designs were almost wildly different, were it not for these ideas being left on the cutting room floor. Without further ado, let's take a look at some of the Dragon Ball content that never was. All journeys have to start somewhere. Goku and Bulma's journey began with the Dragon Balls, and Dragon Ball itself began with Akira Toriyama's one-shot manga, Dragon Boy. This series was something of a pilot for Dragon Ball, a dip of the toe into the action-adventure comedy storytelling genre that differed greatly from Toriyama's previous gag-heavy work, Dr. Slump. While Dragon Boy differed greatly from Dragon Ball, it still served as a prototype for it, a number of the ideas within it carrying over, such as the main protagonist being a young boy with a strange trait, wings in Dragon Boy, and a tail in Dragon Ball, who was paired with a teenage girl as they went on a great journey. Additionally, the martial arts aesthetic and overall setting were very similar to how Dragon Ball turned out. Beyond this, most of Dragon Boy was vastly different from Dragon Ball, which is to say that if these cut-and-forgotten concepts were used in the final product, Dragon Ball might not have become as big as it is now. Could you imagine Saiyans being dragon-winged aliens? Or what if the Dragon Balls just shot out little dragons instead of granting wishes? Yes, that's actually what they did. Have you ever wondered why Dragon Ball Z had that Z in the title? The reason that this letter was added to the title when a second anime series was being made was because, as Toriyama puts it, it was the final letter of the alphabet, and since he planned for the Frieza Saga to be the end of Dragon Ball, he thought it was appropriate to put the final letter of the alphabet in the title. The fact that Toriyama wanted to end the series after the Frieza Saga is pretty well known amongst fans, and it would have probably made the series much different. Obviously, since it would be over and might not have come back for more sagas, series, and movies. Could you imagine if Dragon Ball ended after the Frieza Saga? This entry is a bit different from the rest. Instead of looking at a lost or discarded idea or concept that never made it into the series, we're going to talk a bit about all the things that got lost in translation. Literally. Of course, we're referring to all the censoring and translation errors that occurred as Dragon Ball Z was brought over to the United States. This still fits the bill of this video. There were things that were deleted from the series that changed significant parts of it. Things like death being removed and changed to moving on to the next dimension, or hell becoming the home for infinite losers. There are so many examples of this throughout Dragon Ball Z's early American broadcasts. Heck, we did an entire video about all the censoring. Dragon Ball, specifically Dragon Ball Z, had a rough go in America, and were it not for America's relationship with anime changing over time, fans might have only known the censored versions of the anime. This wasn't the only thing that changed a lot of the story either, since mistranslations and the like also contributed to major changes in the series. This and the censoring made for a much weirder version of Dragon Ball Z. The Tournament of Power is easily one of the best sagas of Dragon Ball Super, filled with amazing animation and a plot that leans fully into the battle-focused nature of the series. That said, there's definitely something missing from the saga, something that might have been there originally. Of course, we're referring to the fact that as each universe was erased one by one, it appeared as though the angels of each universe were pleased with the outcome, smiling sinisterly as trillions of people were erased in seconds. Due to these sinister smiles and the focus on them, many fans theorized that the angels were up to something. That perhaps the Tournament of Power was just a way for the angels to seize power from Zeno. And yet, at the end of the Tournament of Power, no sinister plot was revealed. No hostile takeover happened, and nothing was done to address the weird, sinister smiles of the angels. While we can't confirm it, it feels like there was a major change made to the plot of the Universal Survival Saga at the last minute. An idea that was deleted, were it kept in, would have completely changed the outcome of the Tournament of Power. For a long time, it was never made clear if the movies of Dragon Ball were considered part of the main canon. That is, until a little while back when it was officially stated that all of the Dragon Ball movies are non-canon one-shots that exist in alternate timelines. With this official statement, all of the movies have in a way become deleted stories and ideas that, were they actually canon, would change everything about the series. Think about it. What if Cooler was canon? It would open up a whole world of possibilities and questions. Or what if Gogeta was canon before Dragon Ball Super Broly? In fact, what if all of the filler had been made officially canon? What if all the content that got deleted in Kai to more closely match the manga would have been part of actual Dragon Ball history, changing the entire face of the franchise? Though these ideas weren't abandoned early concepts or things that got lost in last-minute changes, it's still pretty significant that all the movie and filler plots were still thrown out of the main canon after many had thought they were parts of the Dragon Ball lore. This next one is related to the fact that the series was supposed to originally end with the Frieza Saga, since it would have brought everything to a close and negated the need for dead characters to come back. What are we talking about? Vegeta's death, and how if the plan to end Dragon Ball Z after the Frieza Saga had gone through, he would have had no reason to be revived. That's right, the original plan was to have Vegeta die, leaving no room for his redemptive character arc, no room for his family, and no room for any of his strongest moments of growth. This wasn't the only way Vegeta could have possibly been deleted from the franchise too soon. There have also been rumors and speculation that Vegeta was meant to be a one-off villain who would have died at the end of the Saiyan Saga, only for fans to write Akira Toriyama with how much they loved the character, coercing him to keep Vegeta alive. As it is with any character from a visual medium, Frieza went through a concept art process. As many know, the character was based on the ruthless, heartless, and selfish image that Akira Toriyama had of real estate speculators. But that only gave him a personality. He still needed a design, and he eventually came up with the character's first form. This small-statured form was just the beginning. However, as Frieza would transform not once, not twice, but 3 times throughout the saga. From the concept art sheets of Frieza, we can see the beginnings of Frieza's first form. But there's also another concept on the page that may have been a forgotten or scrapped second form design. While there's no way of confirming this, it seems as though the more rotund version of Frieza's design in the upper right corner of this concept art page might have been Frieza's first transformation, an idea that was eventually trashed in favor of the character's larger, more buff second form. Could you imagine if Frieza turned into that? It would have been a whole lot less frightening than his actual transformations, eliciting more laughter than fear, but maybe that's more preferable than his weird third Xenomorph form. It's rather well known amongst Dragon Ball fans that the androids in Cell Saga were riddled with editor input, changing Akira Toriyama's original setup in favor of what ended up in the final product. As the story goes, androids 19 and 20 were originally going to be the androids that Trunks came back from the future to warn the Z-Fighters about. But Toriyama's editor at the time didn't care for their designs, thinking they just looked like some random old dude and a big old pale-faced weirdo. So Toriyama shifted the role of antagonist to androids 17 and 18. But Toriyama's editor still wasn't happy, saying the androids were just some boy and some girl. So eventually, Toriyama came up with Cell, who, as we all know, eventually became the main focus of the saga. The question is, what would have happened if Toriyama went through with androids 19 and 20 being the antagonists of the Android Saga? You can ask the same question of androids 17 and 18. What if they had been the final villains of the saga? The story of editor interference didn't end with the introduction of Cell, since the character's 2 other forms were the result of more editor dissatisfaction. Similar to how it went down with the other androids, Toriyama's editor was disappointed in Cell's imperfect form, which led to Toriyama developing a plot that would allow him to transform, but his editor still wasn't happy with the design, spurring Toriyama to introduce Cell's perfect form. While Cell remaining in his imperfect or semi-perfect forms wouldn't have been a major change to the Dragon Ball lore, it would have been pretty interesting if the whole absorbing Android 17 and 18 plot was never put into place, since perhaps they could have teamed up with Goku and friends to defeat Cell in a much different ending from how things turned out. This isn't the only design idea that was abandoned in regards to Cell, since as you can see from his character design sheet, the villain almost had either a much bulkier form or a much slimmer build, both of which would have made for a much less aesthetically pleasing design. Additionally, the character almost had horns, which would have been just a bit too similar to Frieza's first form. Think back to when the opening theme song and sequence for Dragon Ball Super finally changed. Not only was the song awesome, but the opening also teased that Majin Buu would finally step into the action, something that we'd been wanting ever since the character became a good guy. As the saga started to unfold, we got even more hope that Buu would show off his power as one of the strongest villains in Dragon Ball history. Not only did he take part in the Zen exhibition match, he also got so pumped up for fighting in the real tournament that he went and got all skinny and buff. Clearly, the series was gearing up to have Buu compete in the Tournament of Power, only for this idea to be abandoned as Buu fell into one of his deep sleeps, just like he did when he was picked to fight in the Universe 6 tournament. Maybe this was meant to be a gag and Buu was never going to actually be in the Tournament of Power, or maybe he was meant to be a red herring for Frieza's eventual return. But either way, it would have been crazy if the idea of Buu competing had been utilized. The most recent entry in the Dragon Ball franchise, Dragon Ball Super Broly, is also no stranger to deleted scenes. Apparently, there were a significant amount of scenes deleted from the final cut of the film, 70 minutes worth to be exact. According to fans, some of these scenes involved Raditz and Nappa fighting, implying that earlier versions of Dragon Ball Super Broly spent much more time in the past than the final version did. This would have made for an interesting change, since the film's past segment is rather small and feels somewhat insignificant to the plot, at least in terms to Bardock's story, which feels rather out of place. Perhaps these additional past scenes added some context as to why we learned about Bardock. Or maybe they connected the two past segments together, thus connecting Bardock's story to the larger story at hand. The idea of Raditz fighting Nappa would have also been cool had it not been scrapped, since we can't imagine why the two would battle each other, meaning the scenes in the context of the fight would have likely been pretty interesting. Who knows what else was a part of those cut 70 minutes of Broly, and who knows how they would have changed the film. We've talked countless times about how Akira Toriyama had originally planned to have Gohan take up the torch of Dragon Ball's main character as it entered its last major saga. It was made pretty clear that Gohan was going to be taking up the mantle that Goku had left behind when he died in the Cell Saga. Not only did Gohan defeat Cell, but he was also the main focus of the beginning of the Buu Saga. On top of this, there was also an announcement within the pages of the manga stating that Dragon Ball would continue for a little longer with Gohan as the focus. Suffice it to say, it appeared as though Gohan was going to be the new main character of Dragon Ball. And yet, as we all know, that didn't actually happen. Goku eventually came back into the picture, and ended up being the one to defeat Buu. So, what the heck happened? Well, fans speculated that people weren't happy with Gohan being the main character, or that Toriyama felt Goku would be a better character to end with. Either way, Gohan being the main character was a concept that was dropped, and were it followed through with, the series would have gone in a much different direction. We talked about villain designs that never were, so now let's talk about the characters that started it all, Goku and Bulma, and how they changed drastically during the development of Dragon Ball. From the get-go, Akira Toriyama wanted to make a fun alternate take on Journey to the West, the Chinese story of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. As many know, Goku is based off of Sun Wukong, his name coming from the Japanese name for the Monkey King. This concept of adapting Journey to the West could be seen in both Dragon Boy and in the original designs for Goku and Oolong, both whom bear a very strong resemblance to the Journey to the West characters they're based on. Bulma also had a much different look, sporting a full-on cowgirl ensemble, complete with a lasso and revolver. These versions of the characters were eventually scrapped, and new versions were thought up, getting closer to the versions we know and love, except their outfits and styles were much more modern-looking, with Goku flying on a small jet rather than the Nimbus. If either of these design concepts were chosen as the final versions of the characters, then Dragon Ball would have been way different. Like with the movies, Dragon Ball GT was eventually deemed to no longer be part of the main canon. Because of this, the entirety of the series is now a deleted series of plots that, were they still part of the main canon, would make for an insane timeline when connected to Dragon Ball Super. Luckily, the series was booted from the franchise's canon, since fans have hated it ever since it first aired. It's no wonder the series was so hated too, since it was full of rehashed Dragon Ball tropes, lazy writing, and a whole mess of weird choices that gave us things like Vegeta's mustache and the Shadow Dragons, and that's exactly the problem. Fans already hated the series as a continuation of Dragon Ball Z, and it was insane what it did with the story and characters. It changed everything, and was so hated for doing so that it was deleted from the canon. This is sort of the reverse of the topic of this video, but we're still going to count it, since if GT were suddenly made canon after being booted, it would change everything that Dragon Ball Super has done for the franchise. Last and certainly not least, we have one of the most important parts of the series that came out of deleting something: Super Saiyans. You see, the reason behind the blonde hair of Super Saiyans is inking, specifically inking the manga pages. While working on Dragon Ball, Akira Toriyama found that a lot of his inking assistant's time was being spent on coloring in Goku's black hair. Thus, to save him time, he made Super Saiyans blonde, giving his assistant less work to do and giving the transformation a distinctive look. Call this a technicality, but this means that a concept, Goku having dark hair, was deleted, made blonde instead, and that act of erasure changed everything. Yeah, we're stretching it here, but it's still a good way to tell everyone about the interesting and unique origin of what's arguably the most iconic transformation in all of anime. It also presents a possible outcome that would have also changed everything. If Toriyama had just originally planned to make Goku's hair stick up and remain dark, then Super Saiyan would be far less cool and impressive. In fact, this version of Super Saiyan would mean that Vegeta's eventual transformation wouldn't look any different. So, there you have it. All of the wild ideas that almost made it into Dragon Ball. Did we leave anything out? Would you have preferred these alternate versions of your favorite stories, characters, and designs? Let us know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more Dragon Ball videos. Thanks for watching.